Letter 22 of Letters from Hell. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from Hell by Valdemar Adolph Thisted. Translated by L.W.J.S. Letter 22. Since you heard from me last, and there seems to have been a longer pause than usual, I have roamed about in aimless adventure. There are no accurate means of estimating either distance in hell or the speed of our travels. I expect that both are astounding. Time and space here can only be spoken of in an abstract sort of way, as existing in thought merely. Consequently, there are hardly two souls amongst us that would agree concerning the measure of either, but that holds true of anything. Since everything, then, is imaginary, unanimity is merely accidental, and what is called harmony on earth not to be found here. That a number of souls by social instinct, and under force of habit, should unite at a given place for a given object by no means is proof of concord. For concord presupposes liberty, whereas such souls are under downright compulsion, and, apart from the instinct which drives them in a common direction, no wise at unity among themselves. My roamings, then, are no free will undertaking. Whenever I feel especially miserable and desponding, there is a sense of relief in dashing about blindly with no other object but that of moving. Blindly, I say, meaning heedless of obstacles, pushing through walls, mountains, houses, trees, through living creatures even if they are in my way. The latter, of course, is not altogether pleasant. Fancy rushing through man or beast in your aimless hurry. But one gets used to everything here. "Oh, distracted soul!" your neighbor cries, and is satisfied you should pass. We are always suiting ourselves to circumstances, you see. Are you surprised that I should yield to such madness of motion? True, everyone here has his or her congenial abode. So have I, leading, as you know, a sickening life. But I am helpless once the frenzy seizes me, unhinging my very existence, and away I hie me, as driven by despair. Yes, that it is, despair and nothing else, engendering a need, amounting to passion almost, of trying to escape from oneself, or at least to stupefy oneself. Neither the one nor the other is possible. In the world one succeeds at times, never in hell. But that knowledge does not restrain me. Again and again I perceive the utter uselessness of endeavor, pulling up suddenly, perhaps, to find myself in the strangest of places, and more horribly strange, more dismal than any, is the place from which I lately returned. As a maddened fool I felt driven thither, as a maddened fool I hurried back, utterly confounded. I suppose every soul here is forced to perform that journey once at least, and in so far it might not unaptly be called a pilgrimage, but to a frightful shrine. Whether it is on account of a certain inexplicable mania possessing us all sooner or later, or merely by dint of a dread attraction exercised by that awful place, I know not. But no one escapes the fate of going thither once, if not oftener. You know what a crowd is drawn by a public execution, that people will assist at so dire a spectacle unless positively prohibited. It is strange. But what should you say if any one by morbid attraction had a longing to watch his own execution? Something very like this takes place here. You are aware by this time, and must be so, apart from my inadequate account, that between this evil place and paradise a great gulf is fixed. Great, I say, and would add frightful. But that words invented for earth's needs are altogether unfit to describe that gulf. It is the home of Satan. Do you understand that? In the depth of that abyss the quenchless fire is burning, forever tended by the devil and his host. How far away is it? I cannot tell. I think it is in the outmost limit of hell. How near one may approach it? Even at a distance of hundreds of miles, one feels seized with a giddiness and all the horrors of death. But one is drawn, nevertheless. That one should ever escape it again seems marvelous. How wide the gulf is? When lit up by the radiance of paradise, the eye at a leap seems to carry you across. But I doubt not it may be likened to a shoreless ocean. Light now is fast decreasing, swallowed up by the darkness rising afresh from the abyss. Do you expect me to describe to you that abode of terror? But I can no more depict it than I was able to give a true representation of paradise. It is beyond human possibilities, and I am but human, even in hell. Yet one thing I may tell you, believe me, that more than one rich man is to be found by the awful pit, looking across to where they see the blessed poor in Abraham's bosom, stretching forth their arms too, and entreating for a drop of water to cool their tongue. But that first rich man of the gospel does not appear to be among them. There is a rumor that perchance he was saved. Alas! I was among those begging rich, supplicating with all my soul, but no one heard me. Despair urged me to fling myself into the awful gulf, that perchance I might lose myself amid the howling fiends of the bottomless pit. What power prevented me, and eventually brought me back from the place, I know not. Is it possible that God, in his mercy, is yet keeping me? I have returned then, dreading I shall be carried thither a second time. I must tell you more, though it be a subject of horror both to you and to me. But then all these revelations are fraught with horror, and these letters had better remain unread by those whose self-complacent tranquillity of mind dislikes being harassed. As I returned shivering in every fibre, and conscious of the thought only of Satan and his angels, I all but fell into the arms of one coming towards me on his way to the gulf. But was it a human being, this creature with mangled body and frightfully disfigured countenance? A man indeed, his very appearance bespeaking his name, Judas Iscariot. A piece of rope was round his neck, and in his hand he carried 30 pieces of silver. The rope all but suffocates him, and the money burns his fingers. He keeps throwing it away, but it always returns to his grasp. I have heard that it may be absent a while swelling some usurer's gains, but Judas before long finds it in his closed hand again, bearing the marks of blood. And then he is heard to groan, "What is that to us? See thou to that." A fruitless repentance, which is not repentance, eating away at his soul, and he spends himself in vain efforts to get behind someone and seize him by the neck. What he intends by this is not quite clear, but people think he is anxious to find a charitable soul who will give him back the kiss he once gave to his Lord and Master, and thereby free him from those horrible pieces of silver. But the soul lives not in hell who would care to save him at the cost even of a kiss. He is an object of repugnance to everyone. I, too, burst away from him, horrified. I came across a scrap of newspaper the other day, and my eye was caught by an advertisement offering bridal bouquets and funeral wreaths in great variety. And just beneath it, a stationer expressed his willingness to sell hand-painted cards for the menu of wedding breakfasts and, in memoriam, of the dead. Such is life, I said. Side by side grow the flowers for the adorning of brides and the crowning of corpses. Better sometimes the latter than the former. Better to be clasped in the embrace of death than find love dying before its time. Memorial cards, how touching and how cheap. How we love to speak of the virtues of our departed ones, mourning them ostentatiously, and assuring the world we shall miss them forever. Forever? Look into your own heart, my friend, and expect not to be remembered too long when you are gone. Love's wreaths will fade on your grave, and the night winds alone will keep up their moaning around it. What is this buzzing about me like troublesome flies? Memories? I once had taken a youth into my service. He was a kind of legacy of Aunt Betty's, and for her sake I intended to be kind to him. But somehow I was always finding fault with him. There are people who rouse our evil nature, for no reason one can see. Poor fellow! Perhaps he was not over bright, though he tried his best. But patience was not one of my virtues. I scolded him almost continuously, taking a kind of satisfaction, I believe, in thus revenging myself on what I considered his stupidity. I well remember the many hard words I flung at him, provoked from bad to worse by his meek, sorrowful countenance. At last I said I could not bear his fool's face any longer, and gave him warning. I did help him to another place, where, I fancy, he was more kindly used than with me. But it was a disheartening beginning for one who had to make his way in service, and he had deserved better at my hands. When he had left me, I discovered all sorts of little proofs of his touching fidelity and grateful disposition. How badly I had rewarded the poor fellow for such golden qualities! It could not be called a great matter, but it left a sting. My town residence had the rare amenity of a little garden. It was shut in at the farther end by a blind wall, forming the back of a humble dwelling in the rear. But the wall was not quite blind. It had one little window not far from the ground, to my notion, the one eye of the house which kept looking into my privacy. I had no need to think so, for behind that window sat a poor seamstress who had something more to do than watch my movements. True, she would now and then look up from her needle, as if she delighted in my garden, and she even dared sometimes to put her head out of window to enjoy the fragrance of my flowers. There could be no harm in that, but I disliked it, and availing myself of the letter of the law, I ran up a paling a few feet from the wall. The right of doing so was mine, but it was very wrong. The poor creature had delighted in my garden, the proximity of which had helped her through many a joyless day. She loved flowers, and the sight of green things was grateful to her hard-worked eyes. There were a few thrushes in the garden, and she was cheered by their song. My fence was simply cruel, depriving her not only of these enjoyments, but of fresh air as well, and of the light she sorely needed. I had shut her out from her share of the sky. I had acted heedlessly, and I came to see it before long. Good nature even was stirred, and I actually resolved to make amends. I went round to the back street, but was too late. The poor girl had been obliged to leave her little room, over which the struggles of 10 lonely years had thrown a halo of home. Neither was this a great matter, but little things make up the sum of good or evil in life. I feel sore at heart. I had gone out riding one day. It was in the country, and I intended to look up a farmer in a small village, but did not know his house from the surrounding homesteads. The place seemed asleep in the noonday sun, not a youth within hail to whom I might have thrown the bridle. Looking about, I saw an open cottage door and the figure of a young girl appearing on the threshold. I called her, and she promised to mind the animal, seeming half shy, half ready to please me. I went on my business, and, returning, came upon an interesting spectacle. The mare had become unmanageable. The young girl could hardly hold her, feeling evidently distressed by the creature's pranks. Her efforts to subdue its gambols served as an admirable foil to her figure. Her every movement was charming, and her pretty face reflected so delightfully both fear and vexation, that instead of hastening to her assistance, I stood still behind a shrub watching complacently what I considered an exquisite scene. There was no danger involved. The mare was not vicious, only frolicsome, but the rustic beauty did not understand that, and was evidently frightened. Holding fast by the bridle, jumping now right, now left, her lithe figure following the capering animal. It was merely to ingratiate herself with the damsel that the mare tossed its head, plunging again as if to snap at her kerchief, which now slipped from her shoulders, revealing the whitest of necks. And behold, the masses of golden hair escaped their confinement, falling in a shower of ringlets as though to veil her charms. Her distress increased visibly, a deep glowing mantling her features, her bosom heaving, now on tiptoe, now curving her outstretched arms, bending this way, bending that. She delighted me with her graceful movements. But there was a sudden end to my enjoyment. She caught sight of me, and I was obliged to approach. Had she let go the mare, it would have been no more than I deserved, but she held on faithfully till I was near enough to take hold of the bridle myself. There she stood, burning with shame and anger, her eyes brimming with tears. Before I mounted, I endeavored to slip half a crown into her hand, but she turned from me proudly, the coin rolling at her feet. Surely no great matter. I had wronged the girl by being unkind to her, while reveling in the sight of her beauty, but she came to no harm. On the contrary, I have a sort of conviction that the little adventure proved a useful lesson, teaching her to beware of admiring fops. Nevertheless, memories will not be silenced. Justice is the law of life, be it in the world, or in heaven, or in hell, and every act of man, though it contain but a shadow of wrong, calls for atonement, unless God himself in his mercy will blot it out. I know it now. I know it. Who shall free me from even such guilt? Do you see that tree? Often and often I sink down beneath it with groans of regret, for on its branches are gathered the opportunities of a wasted life. They keep falling down on me, ready to crush me. I am often driven thither by the lashes of the awful inevitable. How happy I might have been, how much I might have done in the days of golden possibility. But I would not. As a blind man I walked in life, careless of light. It is dark now, but I can see, I do see, the failure of my days. End of Letter 22.